Hello and welcome back to Litcast. Today we're going to be exploring a lesser spoken about but still very important theme in an Inspector Calls, the theme of time. So, an Inspector Calls can be described as one of Priestley's time plays because it explores the relationship between the past, the present and the future. And some people who've watched and studied the play have even suggested that the Inspector is some sort of cosmic Time Lord. Now, I'm not suggesting you write about Doctor Who in any of your essays, but it's a theory, and that's the wonderful thing about literature. You can think about all of the different possibilities and interpretations. So the revelation at the end of Act 3 that a girl has just died and that the Inspector is on his way suggests that real time has in some way been distorted or manipulated by the Inspector, who appears to carry out his investigation under the increasing pressure of time. As he says, "My trouble is that I haven't much time." Indeed, throughout the play, there are over 100 direct references to time or timing, so it's most definitely a theme. It is no coincidence that before the Inspector arrives to investigate events that have happened in the past, Mr. Burling speaks with, admittedly, very misplaced confidence about the future. And then towards the end of the play, the Inspector prophesies the very real fire and blood and anguish that will eventually manifest into both of the world wars. Then, just as Mr. and Mrs. Burling and Gerald are putting the events of the night behind them, the telephone call announces that their ordeal is about to begin all over again. So J.B. Priestley wrote the play for an audience just coming out of the horrors of the Second World War, and yet he set his play in 1912, 2 years before the start of the First World War. So immediately we have the opportunity there to explore that irony that can be delivered through Mr. Burling's lines in Act 1. So that use of time there to be able to explore that irony and to undermine his character. At the end of the play, we're left with a sense that the events are going to start all over again, and we wonder whether things will be different and also how the characters will behave. So one time theory, like I said, there's several time theories here, suggests that when we die, we re-enter our life and live it all over again, and only by doing things better can we escape that cycle and begin a new life in which we do not repeat our mistakes. Another theory states you could be given the gift of seeing forward in time as well as looking back. This would mean that just as you can look back and see what actions led to your present situation, you can look forward and see the consequences of your actions. So, if you wished, you could change those actions and avoid the consequences. A really good example of this is A Christmas Carol, where Scrooge is shown Christmas past, present and future in the hope that he changes himself to avoid the consequences of the future, and he's able to reflect on his past in order to see how he's arrived at his less than ideal present. So an Inspector Calls does contain elements of these time theories. The Inspector, arriving before the suicide is a reality, offers each character a chance to see the consequences to change the future, to break the circle. Now, admittedly, at the time where they're all talking, they don't know that the suicide's not happened yet. But this is the point. They had that opportunity to reflect and to be remorseful, and they didn't necessarily all take it. Eric and Sheila seem prepared to face up to their past actions and to improve themselves, but the others don't. The reflections on the past and the possibilities of the future highlight the importance of caring for others, of taking responsibility for our actions, and considering the consequences of them. Now, a notable characteristic of the Inspector's inquiries is his ability to pinpoint precisely when each event leading to Eva's suicide took place. So referring to a letter and a sort of diary that Eva left at her lodgings, the Inspector creates a complete timeline of Eva's life from her dismissal from Burling's factory up until her death. So the ability to do that and the ability to chart her life precisely, while actually the timing of the play itself is less clear, is an interesting contrast. And actually, even though the play has a strange use of time in the fact that we're seeing things and then perhaps they loop around again, the actual action that we see takes place in real time. And that is really important as well, because we get to see those events play out for real, and we get to explore them in real time and feel those emotions in real time with the characters. So to add to the inspector's mysteriousness, his knowledge of events, apparently before they've even happened, along with his steady revelation of the characters' pasts and their links to the dead girl over the 2-year period, all give him this sort of mystical, otherworldly quality. And the inspector's departure leaves the characters free to decide their future. They can decide what they do next. And they have that time between him leaving and the phone ringing to decide whether to reflect, to show remorse, to take responsibility for their actions, or to refute the inspector's existence, which is what they decide to do. And at the end, we're left wondering how they're going to cope with reliving that close scrutiny of their dealings when the cycle of questions inevitably begins again. And it is important to remember that by setting the play in 1912 and presenting it to that later audience, J.B. Priestley covers an era which includes those monumentous events of the World Wars. And the failure of the older characters to learn anything reflects the failure of generations to learn from the mistakes of the recent past. There's dramatic irony in the characters' talk of hopes for peace and prosperity, but we know that this doesn't happen. So by 1945, J.B. Priestley was hoping the second time around the world might learn from past mistakes, and we might see hopes realised if we, the audience, can accept the challenge to be caring and socially aware. All right, so that is a brief overview of the theme of time in An Inspector Calls, a really interesting theme, and one that is often not spoken about quite so much, largely because it doesn't link as cleanly to context, but it's still an important theme to consider nevertheless. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode. We'll be having a couple more Inspector Calls episodes coming out very soon. Remember to subscribe and find us wherever you get your podcasts normally, and I'll see you in the next one. Listening to Litcast, the podcast for GCSE and A-level revision. The music that you hear in this episode is called Galaxy and was written by Ixon, and you can find the rest of his music on SoundCloud. You can also find us on other social media channels, including YouTube, where you'll also find our Litcast live episodes. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope to see you again.